What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some University of Colorado wide receiver versus DB one-on-one. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you are a wide receiver and would like a daily workout schedule to follow in the gym and on the field, check out that very first link in the description below for our ultimate 8-week wide receiver workout plan. You'll get 500 plus wide receiver drills and gym exercise worked into this plan with the exact sets and reps to follow. We give examples of each drills to do on the field. So I hope you guys can check this out. Very first link in the description below. Let's get started with this video. So we're going to be breaking down some clips here from like an off-season workout here from University of Colorado. This first route or first release, I guess we could talk about, is going to be called a shock release. Okay, so I'm going to play this clip full speed and then we're going to break it down. So this wide receiver comes off the ball, gives this shock release to a DB and runs this slant route and makes this catch. Now, I posted this on Instagram, posted this on TikTok, and a lot of people were saying that, oh, this is offensive pass interference. This is illegal. This is completely legal, fellas. You see guys in the NFL do this all the time, like George Pickens does this a lot. I've seen guys like DK Metcalf do this a lot in the league. It's legal within 5 yards, right? You obviously can't run 10 yards downfield, have a DB who's 10 to 12 yards off and just shove him to the ground. That's obviously going to be a flag. But this would be just classified as wide receiver and DB just hand fighting off the line. A DB can jam us off the line, so we can also get physical with him off the line of scrimmage. Now, a shock release is something that I recommend for wide receivers to use probably like towards the beginning of a game, right? You want to use this to maybe set the tone early with the DB. Maybe you have a DB who likes to be physical. You're on the bigger or stronger side of things, and you do this to the DB. Now, we had a lot of guys so we just had a camp out in Denver, Colorado, and there's some DBs there, and the DBs were very physical guys. They like to get hands, and a lot of the wide receivers were not as strong as the DBs. The DBs were bigger, the DBs were stronger, and they kept trying to come off the ball and use this shock release, and they would get stood up at the line every single time. Guys, you only can use this if you are bigger than the DB, stronger than the DB, or maybe more explosive than him, okay? That's what I would recommend with this type of release. And obviously, you look at this wide receiver, and then you look at the DB. There's a clear size difference. It looks like there's a clear strength difference. That's when you want to use this thing. Set the tone early, and this will start to create some space for you off the line. Now, when it comes to mechanics of the shock release, I would suggest treating it exactly like how you would stock block a DB who's maybe 8 to 10 yards off downfield, right? So when you're stock blocking a DB, the mechanics need to be, number one, you need to have a good base. A lot of times when guys do this shock release, I feel like they lunge a little bit too far. This wide receiver, I've seen worse, but a lot of guys will lunge and reach, and they leave their feet way behind them. And all it takes is this DB to grab your arms and pull, and you're going to be falling flat on your face. Or just to step back maybe a little bit. And again, you're going to fall flat on your face. You're going to be off balance. So you got to make sure that you keep your feet underneath you, similar to how you would keep your feet underneath you when you block. Now, when you get hands on the DB, it is important that we are not flat-footed. We have to keep my feet driving. Very similar to, like I said, a block as a wide receiver with you got a DB 8 to 10 yards downfield. So keep the feet moving, and you want to make sure that you drive from the hips and drive from the legs. Get lower than this DB and go. So shock release is a great release to use if and only if you are a bigger and stronger wide receiver than the DB. If you are not a bigger or stronger wide receiver than most DBs, you use your speed, you use your quickness, and those are some of the releases that we're going to get into throughout this video. But also, this is a great release. If you're a bigger guy and you want to set the tone, I love this release for him because, again, that will create some space with that DB for you throughout the game. Okay, so now, next clip we're going to be looking at here is a wide receiver running a slant route versus an inside shade press coverage DB. So as a wide receiver, when we come up to the line of scrimmage, there are two things mainly that help me pick the press release that I'm going to use versus a DB. Number one thing that I am looking for is going to be his leverage. So is he shaded to the inside of me? Is he shaded to the outside? Or is he head up right in front of my face? The reason why we look for that is that tells us a lot of information about this DB's coverage, right? So I'm going to play this clip full speed so you guys can see it, and then I'll get back to my thought on that. But we're looking for his leverage. So this wide receiver uses something called a diamond release. So a diamond release is a great way to get separation on a slant route when you have that inside shade press coverage. Because when he's inside leverage, like I said, that's why we want to look for his leverage. He is taught to what? Not give up the inside. Do not let us run a slant. Don't let us run a dig or a post. Anything inside breaking, he wants to force us where? He wants to force us to the sideline. So if you guys are running this slant and your thought process is, I'm going to maybe attack him or I'm going to give him a quick jab outside then try to cross his face, a disciplined DB is not going to give up his leverage. He is going to try to force you to the outside on everything that he can do possible to force you to that sideline because he's trying to cut off the amount of space that the quarterback has. Okay, so now what we would have to do, like let's say for example you had this inside shade press and you had to run a post, right? That breaks at 10 yards, the DB's sitting at press. So we have about 9 to 10 yards to be able to stack the DB and break or get his hips to open up and slip underneath him, right? With an outside release. When you have inside shade press and you have an inside breaking route like a post, you want to take the outside release. Take what the DB gives you. But since you have to run a slant route, you don't really have time to stack over the top of him. What you would want to do is you would want to try to attack his outside shoulder, his outside hip, get him to flip his hips so we could slip underneath. So again, the reason why we got to look for his leverage is that tells us what he's going to do. And what helps me pick my release is the distance that he has from me, right? Because like if he's way off like 7 to 8 yards, I'm probably just going to run the slant. He's pressed up like this and I have to run a slant. I know I'm probably going to work something called this diamond release, right? So it's about leverage of the DB and it's about the distance between me and the DB. So same idea. Like let's say we're running that post route and he's right up on the line of scrimmage. I know I'm probably going to give him a quick release and go because he's right up on the line. But let's say he's 2 to 3 yards off. It's the same concept. He's trying to stop the inside route, but since he's 2 to 3 yards off, I want to close the space with him. So it's about leverage and distance with this DB. So with this diamond release, when this wide receiver takes off to the outside, our goal is to get this DB to open up the gate, flip the shoulders, and flip the hips. So for me to get him to do that, I got to focus on 3 things. Number 1, my body language. My hips and my shoulders have to self-fade because that is what the DB is going to be reading. Number 2, when I come off the ball, I got to make sure I'm going fast. I can't be running slow. I can't be slowing myself down before I make this cut. I have to commit my speed and I have to commit my body language. And then last but not least, I think this receiver could have done a better job of it. I want to take full strides. I don't want to take choppy strides because if you take choppy steps, that DB may not believe that we are going deep. So if you can do all those things and you know when to use it because you identified the DB's leverage and the distance he has from you, that is what's going to get you separation in this case, fellas. Please do not try to force the inside release. This DB will stay patient. He will keep his leverage. And if you're running a slant route, let's say he has to run a slant, and let's say the slot receiver in a real game is also running a slant, and you get rerouted and you run that slant, you're right next to him. That's your fault. That's not the quarterback's fault when he throws a pick because you have 2 defenders or 1 defender being able to guard 2 specific routes. Play this again, full speed one more time. Great job by this wide receiver also throwing that DB by when he gets his hips to flip and winning on that route. So this is actually a good rep here from the DB. The wide receiver, I think, ends up getting a catch here, and he finishes the play very well. But there's some things that this receiver could have cleaned up on this specific rep. So he is going to be running a dig route versus inside shade press. So remember what we talked about against this. We want to try to identify 2 things, leverage and distance. So again, he's inside leverage, and we got maybe about a yard of space, half a yard. So what do you think you want to do? You want to attack him to the inside. You want to close the distance with him and take the outside release. We cannot try to force the inside release because this DB will stay patient and you can't run a dig catching the ball on the opposite hash. And one-on-ones, that might be cool, but in a real game, that's not going to fly. So let's play this thing full speed. So he attacks him inside, takes the outside release, but he makes a mistake of not getting skinny, right? That's why there was a lot of contact at the top of the break. Now, did he win the rep? Yeah, he won the rep, and that's a great job finishing because sometimes receivers, things don't go our way, and we have to go finish the rep. But again, we want to try to avoid that contact and that wasted time at the top of the break. And I'm going to tell you guys how we can do that. So again, he does everything that we talked about in the last clip. He attacks the DB inside, he closes the space, he takes the outside release. But when we take this outside release, anytime that we have press coverage, what should our goal be? Our goal should be to try to stack the DB. For those of you that don't know what stack means, stack is when you're in a route, and it's usually on a route that's like deeper than 5 yards, like 10, 12, 15, whatever it is. You want to try to get this DB trailing your back hip. You want him behind you. You want to be stacked over the top of him. That should be our goal, right? So our goal should be, I'm going to attack him inside. I'm going to move him inside, take the outside release, because that's what he's giving me, but I can't just take off and go run because he'll get hands on me and force me to the sideline. I got to take that outside release, and my goal should be to stack. But to be able to stack, you have to do something called getting skinny. So getting skinny is essentially just running hip to hip with the DB, right? You never want to try to run away from a DB, because if you try to run away from a DB and there's a big gap between the two of you guys, it is harder for you to get back over the top. You are giving him time to recover and beat you to the angle of the break point. Now, let's say, for example, the DB's faster than us and I can't restack him. Yeah, that's okay. You would still run the route the exact same way. Just at the break point, you would do something a little bit different. You would try to slip under him and throw by. Right now, if you don't get skinny, there's a big gap between the two of you. It's very hard to throw by. And by throw by, I mean taking your inside hand, putting it on the back of the DB's shoulder or hip at the break point, and using it to swat him by and slip under him. I can't do that if I don't get skinny, and that's the mistake that this receiver makes. That's why he runs into this DB, because he did not stay tight. If off the release, he would have attacked him here, and when he bursted up vertical, he stayed hip to hip with him and stayed tight, got skinny. Even if he doesn't stack over him, at least we are in a position to use this arm to throw by and slip under. You never want to maintain a gap of space between you and the DB. And you could make the argument, well, if he's running an out route, he's got a lot of space. Yeah, but that's an out route, guys. You're running an in route. We can't use that what if situation for every single example. You have to understand, every release that you run, you want to get skinny. You would even want to get skinny on an outside breaking route, because what could you do? If you're hip to hip with this DB, you could use your body and lean into him, make a break, and you got all this space with separation because you leaned into him with your route. Let's play this again, full speed one more time. Again, right idea by this wide receiver, but again, fellas, it's about having the IQ of knowing what to do, but also the technique behind it to be able to execute the right thing to do. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like an 8-week wide receiver field and gym workout schedule to follow, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to get you guys on that. I'll see you guys next time.